Welcome back to the future of. This is the space for those curious about the future. I tell you about the technologies, strokes of genius and discontinuities that could go big and shape the way we live tomorrow. In this episode, 5 visionary insights. 1. Augmented humans, a nice little tale we tell ourselves to get our minds off the long-term consequences of artificial intelligence. 2. Dogs, cancer, and AI. That is, how an algorithm learns from the ability of dogs to recognize tumors, to bring this ability to our smartphones in the future. 3. Electric tankers. No, that's not nonsense. A new generation of electric ships is hitting the market, though for now ironically they also serve to transport fossil fuels. 4. Ingenuity. The small helicopter drone accompanying the Perseverance rover to Mars will revive the Wright brothers' dream, 120 years later and 200 million miles away. 5. Blockchain Town. Continues the project of an American tycoon to build from scratch, in the desert, a city based on blockchain. Genius or madness?
Augmented humans or not? The term augmented humans refers to the combination of humans and artificial intelligence. The idea of AI working together with people to give them additional abilities that come from machine-brain collaboration is a fascinating story, but there is a problem. Collaboration is only transient, that is, it lasts until the algorithm reaches and surpasses human capabilities. After that, our biological abilities don't have much to add to the machine. All credit for this reflection goes to Rob Tays, who, in an article this week in Forbes, introduces the concept of Centaur AI, which I was not familiar with, find very interesting, and tell you about in this episode of The Future of. Centaur AI is that stage where man and machine work together. And by collaborating, they perform better than they would individually. The examples are very interesting. When DeepMind Alpha Zero, the chess program that beat man, achieved its first victory over a human, it formed a man algorithm team that was stronger than both man and machine taken alone for a long time. The algorithm was able to analyze the game millions of moves in advance, better than any champion could have done. The men, on the other hand, were better at devising a game strategy, and using a touch of unpredictability, capable of challenging the algorithm, which was initially too rational and mechanistic. How long did this fabulous tandem last? Very little. Today, there is virtually no chance of humans beating the machine, and adding our brains to the algorithm provides an insignificant contribution to the computer. Other cases. Autonomous driving on trucks and radiology. These are classic examples. We are squarely in the Centaur AI phase. Humans are already on autonomous trucks, but as a safety backup for legislative reasons. AI on vehicles already helps with lane keeping, changing speed based on traffic conditions, braking in case of unexpected events, alerting the driver if they are tired and about to fall asleep, and many other things. That is, it is really the case of augmented man and collaboration. The same thing happens in the medical field, where AI helps the radiologist to make better diagnoses, but the space reserved for humans is constantly decreasing. Translated, when the Centaur AI phase is over, the algorithm will no longer need a driver to drive a vehicle, or a radiologist to detect abnormalities in X-rays. The implications, of course, are many. If we think about the impact on jobs, I am not overly catastrophic. I share the view that jobs lost in various industries impacted by AI will be partly recovered by new jobs in the technology sector. But if you were a truck driver, a chess player, or a radiologist, that's not irrelevant. While the balance of jobs lost versus created may well be zero, if I'm on the list of those lost, I have a problem, a real, contingent, immediate one. And if you expect the states to react, providing a fast and effective res killing, well, to me, it doesn't seem very realistic. But this is not even the theme. The theme is the possession of the capacity to generate value. It used to be that humans produced value through physical force, farmers, soldiers, laborers. Then we moved on to intellectual resources, bureaucrats, artists, priests, scientists, clerks, and so on. AI renders useless many, if not all, of these useful gifts to procure a living wage. AI cannot be stopped, and it would not make sense. Finding better technological solutions for people to live on, and for companies to improve their profitability, would render a Luddite approach to the subject useless. It wouldn't change anything. Nor would it make sense to ban AI for a state. It would lose in international competitiveness. I don't have the solution, let alone if it could come from a simple podcast, but I do have a suggestion. Let's try to regulate the speed at which AI enters our economic and social systems, so that we can plan for managing the changes it brings. The problem is not AI itself, but an uncontrolled advent of it.
Dogs, Cancer and AI. A group of researchers at the MIT Center for Bits and Atoms has used prostate cancer diagnoses conducted by dogs trained for the purpose to feed a machine learning algorithm. The goal is to create an electronic nose capable of detecting tumors with the accuracy and reliability typical of man's best friend. But let's go step by step. That dogs have a special sense of smell is a well-known fact. They help us in airports to search for narcotics, in the mountains to recover people left under avalanches, and, perhaps a little less known fact, but even more important, to recognize potential tumors in humans. The idea of using dogs to detect cancer was first proposed for melanomas in 1989, and since then, canines' detection abilities have often surpassed machine-based odor analysis. Think that, in a 2015 study, disease-sniffing puppies had detected prostate cancer from urine samples, with 98 to 99% accuracy. Incidentally, prostate cancer is the second most common cancer in men, affecting an average of 1 in 9 individuals at some point in their lives. There are, of course, several scientific tests to aid in diagnosis, but as part of the search for more options, especially low-cost ones, researchers looked for olfactory biomarkers of prostate cancer in urine samples. And they submitted them to dogs. Those in the experiment were animals that, despite receiving fairly limited training, were able to detect the presence of the disease in more than 70% of cases. With longer and more intensive training, then, these percentages are bound to increase and approach the 2015 results. But the goal, of course, is not to have more dogs, which as you can understand is still a long and expensive process, but to use artificial intelligence to replicate the ability of animals. As a first step toward developing electronic noses with similar capabilities, the MIT team used the dog's diagnoses to train a type of artificial intelligence based on an artificial neural network to evaluate volatile chemicals detected by urine. Without going into the details of the experiment, we can say we're just getting started. More tests will be needed, samples of patients in the early stages, refinement of the algorithm, and so on, but the stated goal is to patent a device where the software can reside on our smartphones, and some olfactory device, a kind of electronic nose, can be used for testing at the individual level. Just think how many lives a simple sample analysis, done from time to time, can save, as easily as when we step on the scale to see if we've gained a few pounds. Electric tankers. Yes, you got it right. It's not a joke or a play on words, although there is a certain bitter irony. Electric and clean ships to transport loads that are anything but green. But you have to start somewhere. Cargo ships account for nearly 3% of annual greenhouse gas emissions, according to the International Maritime Organization, IMO, the United Nations body that regulates the sector. In 2018, the IMO agreed to reduce shipping emissions by 50% from 2008 levels by 2050, a goal that is spurring investment not only in batteries, but also in cleaner fuels like hydrogen and ammonia. Pioneer Japan. A new ship powered only by lithium-ion batteries is about to make an appearance along Japan's coast. The 60-meter-long tanker will be the first all-electric ship of its kind as soon as it is completed in 2022. Tokyo-based Asahi Tanker will own and operate the E5 model ship, which, ironically, will carry marine fuels to fill the tanks of other cargo ships in Tokyo Bay. The 3.5 megawatt-hour energy storage system is the size of 40 Tesla Model S batteries, enough capacity to propel the ship for many hours before needing to connect to a shore-based charging station. The manufacturer of these special batteries for ships, which is called Corvus, has already installed more than 400, and on a quarter of the vessels, we speak of propulsion already 100% electric, in other cases mixed. Most of the models are used to transport passengers and cars through the Norwegian fjords, where ecological regulations are already more restrictive than in other countries in the world. And the good thing is that electric is spreading rapidly to other categories of ships. The batteries on the tanker E5 are already relatively powerful for the purpose, that of short coastal transport, and several larger projects are in development. The Yara Birkeland, an 80-meter-long container ship, will use a 9 megawatt-hour system for all of its propulsion when it launches later this year, and Corvus is providing 10 megawatt-hours batteries for Ida Perla, a cruise ship with as many as 3,330 passengers. In addition to global commitments to reduce emissions, the other reason for this boom is related to the price of batteries. Lithium-ion technology has become significantly cheaper due to the explosion of the electric car market on land. Average battery pack prices were about $140 per kilowatt-hour in 2020, far cheaper than the roughly $670 in 2013. Prices are estimated to drop to about $100 per kilowatt-hour by 2023, according to a report by research firm Bloomberg NEF, so there's still plenty of room for the technology to spread. Of course, optimism should not be overstated. Large ocean-crossing ships, those that have to stay at sea for weeks at a time, will probably never use electric propulsion. At the current state of technology, in fact, they would need to be recharged well before touching land, so at most they could use mixed solutions, such as electric plus hydrogen. In any case, it is a fascinating frontier that tells us how the ships of the future will be, and a further effort towards the safeguard of our environment.
Ingenuity. Now that the Perseverance rover has landed on Mars in search of ancient traces of life, excitement is rightly skyrocketing. Perhaps less attention has been given to the small helicopter called Ingenuity, which NASA technicians intend to raise in flight on the Red Planet. How does it work? And what does it do? First of all, Ingenuity is a demonstrator, a project that seeks to test a new capability for the first time, with a limited range. The capability, of course, is to soar from the surface of another planet, something never experienced before. Ingenuity has 4 specially made carbon fiber propellers arranged in 2 rotors that spin in opposite directions at about 2,400 RPM, much faster than it would take a craft of the same mass. It weighs just 1.8 kilograms to take off on Earth. Why? Because Mars' thin atmosphere makes it difficult to get enough lift. It's 99% less dense than Earth's, so Ingenuity needs to be light, have larger blades and turn faster than would be required to operate on Earth. It also has innovative solar cells, batteries, and other components. Ingenuity does not carry scientific instruments, and is a separate experiment from the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover. It will be programmed from the ground, although it will have the ability to make some autonomous decisions. Since there is a consistent time delay in transferring data from Mars to Earth and back, it is not possible to guide it in real time with a joystick, as any drone pilot would. It will rise from the ground for 4 or 5 meters vertically, and then return to the ground. If these experiments are successful, it will be able to go to greater distances, traveling back and forth the space of a soccer field, more or less. If successful, it will also take aerial photos. Everything will have to work, not only the mechanical part, but also the ability to recharge the batteries with solar panels, and the ability to preserve itself intact in front of the freezing Martian nights, where temperatures drop to minus 90 degrees. In short, already in the short term there are some challenges not exactly minor. The long-term goals then, are quite clear. Having a perspective of the surroundings from a few meters high is something that exceeds the current capabilities of the rovers, and is better even than the images from satellites that orbit the planet at kilometers away. This, in the future, will help rovers and ground vehicles learn more about their surroundings, prevent hazards, and do inspections, all with the thought that one day there might even be people on the planet. At a later stage, drones could also have real active roles, such as transporting materials from one part to another. Just think, it took over 5 years, from 2014 to 2019 to design and build it. And now it's ready to take flight to Mars. Good luck to him too, almost 120 years after the Wright brothers and the first controlled flight of the flyer. It feels like starting all over again, but over 200 million miles away from us.
Blockchain Town. If you take a ride in Nevada, about 20 miles from the city of Reno, what you'll see is a semi-desert landscape with low thorny shrubs, where you might even encounter herds of wild horses, grazing freely. Under a starry sky and without many lights around, it might even be romantic, but that's not why I'm telling you about it. In 2018, a rather eccentric lawyer and blockchain exporter named Jeffrey Burns bought a huge parcel of wilderness, larger than that occupied by the entire city of Reno, paying a whopping $170 million for it. Or rather, to be precise, he had it bought by his startup that appeared out of nowhere, but with a very clear name, Blockchain Limited Liability Corp. The idea is to create a sort of experimental community spread over almost 200 square kilometers, where houses, schools, commercial districts, and production studios will be built. And then on with the fantasy, campuses, high-tech parks, spaces dedicated to e-gaming, in short, a city created from scratch. And the core of this giant project wants to be just the blockchain. Let's say that the idea of building new cities from scratch is not a new concept, but here there is just something more. An enabling technology at the core. Burns thinks blockchain will make it possible for ordinary people to control their own data, which is the lifeblood of the digital economy, without relying on big companies, banks or governments. Plus there's the real estate component, which is not trivial. Burns proposes to build 15,000 homes and 3 million square feet of commercial and industrial space within 75 years. Genius or crazy? At first blush, I'd say a madman who won't give up. The county's master plan, for example, does not allow residential development in the Tahoe-Reno Industrial Center, where most of Blockchain LLC's property is located, allows at most 3,500 homes to be built in painted rock. The depowering of the real estate portion of the project would have taken down a bison, but our hero didn't give up. On the contrary, it confirmed his view that the bureaucracy of local governments is just a slowdown in the movement of men, capital and ideas. And so he upped his game. He wants Nevada to change its laws to allow for the creation of innovation zones, where companies would have powers like those of a county government, including setting up court systems, levying taxes and building infrastructure, while making land and water management decisions. The prospect has been greeted with some skepticism by Nevada lawmakers, although the proposal has yet to be formally presented or discussed in public hearings. Most politicians, now controlled by Democrats, are on the one hand eager to diversify Nevada's economy, which is far too dependent on tourism, but on the other are afraid to give benefits and incentives to businesses while struggling to fund health care and education. Not to mention, I would add, that while relying on a democratic and transparent technology like blockchain, the rights in question would be held by Burns' company, with all the problems associated with big tech's management of data and decisions. And after all, if Burns chose Nevada for his utopia, and Musk did the same for his car factory, there are always economic reasons. Nevada is one of the states that provides the greatest tax benefits to newcomers. But tell me, even with blockchain making life and transactions easier, disintermediating the big public and private players, would you go and live in a city where taxes and courts are run by a private company? Thank you for listening to the future of, really. You could have listened to the radio, you could have spun a vinyl, you could have put on a cassette, you could have used a stereotype, to know what it was, but instead you preferred the future of. That's what I thank you for, and you still have hundreds of episodes to discover. Isaac Asimov, in 1964 wrote, "The world of 2014 will have few routine jobs that cannot be done better by some machine than by any human being. Humanity will then have become largely a race of machine bidders. Schools will have to be oriented in this direction.